What's up, guys? This is Ryan from Elevate Cyber. We're going to continue on this series, What You Need to Know for OSCP. And in this video, we're going to be covering a specific privilege escalation technique when it comes to Linux. Now, this one is going to be, the reason that I'm including it is it's been very relevant, I found, both for OSCP and CTFs, and it really illustrates a key security concept here, and that is, kind of exploiting these world writable files that shouldn't be world writable. Now, what does world writable mean? Essentially, what world writable is anyone, regardless of their what group they're in Linux, like what their ID is, what group they belong to or whatever, anyone is able to write to this particular file. Now, a lot of times that's not an issue, but if that is like a special file, or maybe like, say, a higher privileged account runs that, it's a script or something like that, you can almost always turn this into some kind of shell. Now, in this specific case, right, because I want to keep this, refined down to what you need to know for OSCP, this one is when you see etc password as a world writable file. Now, typically you would be running your, say you get access to a Linux server, right? You, through whatever means, you get some code execution, you spawn your shell. Now you're looking to elevate your privileges because you notice, like, hey, I'm not the root account, Oops, sorry. Here we go. You run ID and you say, this is not a part of the root, GID or root UID. So, I try to do something like, say, maybe cat etc shadow, which is normally something that is reserved for higher privilege accounts, like a root account. And I see I can't do that. So obviously there's some privileges to get. Now, probably at this point, you run your priv checker scripts, and they come back with a ton of information. You might be overwhelmed, but if you see that when you look at the permissions of etc password, if you see anything that involves like a world writable permission, right? We've covered permissions before on this video, but to give you guys a quick recap so you understand what's going on here, the first three, this first one here basically denotes, before all of this, you might see like a D if it's a directory. We don't, so we know this is a file. Now, the first three here correspond to read, write, and execute. I'm sorry, this dash here, if this was a D instead of a dash, that'd be a directory. Now, these first three here correspond to the owner of the file. We see here that root owns the file, as it should. And the owner of the file is able to write, which is the W, and is able to read. Okay? The next three, remember, because it goes read, write, execute, right? So the next three correspond to the group. The group is also owned by root, and they're only able to read. All right. And now the last three correspond to everyone else on the system, right? They're able to read and they're able to write, not execute. No one can execute this, as you would imagine. But yeah, that is the vulnerability here. Anyone can write to this. If you can write to etc password, then what you can do is you can create an additional account and have that account spawn a root shell and effectively hijack the root account that way. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that here. It's really simple. It might sound like tricky or whatever. It's really simple. As long as you have right permissions, your account has right permissions, then this is something you can do. So we'll use vim to do this, and we'll vim etc password. All right. Now this is, the etc password file. It might look a little intimidating if you're not too used to it, but we're going to break down exactly how, like, what these things mean, right? So to help us out here, I've, created this cherry tree note here. So this is the format. You got to understand the format for etc password, right? The first characters correspond to the username. It's kind of delimited by these colons here. That's the delimiter. So after the username, like in this case, right, we have root or Kali, and then the next one corresponds to the hash. Now, typically the hashes are stored in etc shadow nowadays, and no longer stored in etc password. If that's the case, you'll see an X here. That just means that they're not storing the hash in this etc password file. They're storing it, in etc shadow instead, as they should be. The next corresponds to the UID, which is like the user ID, if you will. 0 normally denotes the root account, and any other number is like some other user. GID is for the group ID, again, 0 and whatever else. And then the next is kind of optional, right? You can have some special notes here. In this case, they just have a special note saying that this is the root account and this is the Kali account. You could have anything there. It doesn't really matter. After that, you have where is their home directory, okay? So for here, you see the home is actually /root. And, typically when you log into a root account, that's where its home directory is located. And conversely, for a user account, they're normally stored in /home and then the name of the user. So everything looking normal there. Now on the default shell, this is like where their shell is spawned, what it defaults to, right? Bin bash. So we have bin bash. So standard bash shells there. So that's how you interpret what's going on in these files, right? All these just are different accounts on the system. Not all of them are even meant to be logged in, as you see all these no login ones. Some of them are like system accounts and stuff like that. But since we do have write access to this file, what we're able to do is we can actually add our own user. Now to save some time, I've already copied this. I'll just paste it in here. But let's just break down what I'm doing here. I'm creating a new user. I'm just calling it hacker, okay? And instead of putting an X denoting that the hash is going to be stored in etc shadow, because remember, we don't have access to etc shadow. We only have access to this file. So instead, I'm going to put the password hash right here. That's something I'm able to do. And the way I got this hash is basically this is a hash for a password called super secret passwd. That's just the password that I chose to use for this example. What you can do is you can generate a password, right? I just kind of skipped this out to save some time, but you can use like OpenSSL, which is a command line utility that you should have installed already on Kali. If not, you can grab it from the app repository. But basically, you can create your own password and generate a hash for it, and you just plug that hash into this etc password file right here. And that's how you generate the hash for whatever password it is. And of course, this is a password that that's important, right? So we can use it to log in here in a second. But here's like the more important bits of this, right? We're going to be saying that the UID, the user ID is 0, which remember, that corresponds to the root account, and the group ID is also 0, which corresponds to the root group, right? And here we got our notes that this is an account called hacker. And we're going to say the home directory is /root. So that's going to, put us in that directory and just say, hey, spawn a bash shell. So the fact that we're using the root UID and GID, that's going to give us root permissions. And so now if I just save this, might have screwed something up there. There we go. So now if I save this, what I should be able to do is do a simple SU into that hacker account and then type super secret passwd. And now you see, just like that, it spawned the root shell. I mean, we can confirm here we are root. So now we will be able to do anything the root account can do, and we have effectively hijacked this account. So it's really that simple. It's just as simple as identifying the world writable etc password file and then entering in our own entry, the new account. Use SU, go into that account, type in the password that we generated a hash for. In this case, I just chose super secret passwd, like this. This is just what I chose. You can make it whatever you want. I think there might be some rules on your Linux operating system. Make sure it's a appropriate length or something. I'm not sure if there's any checks or not. But this is what I went with. You guys can go with whatever you want. And I would definitely save this entry, save this somewhere on your notes, whatever you choose to use as your password. That way you save some time in the future, because this is a vulnerability that you'll find from time to time in CTFs, maybe even OSCP or whatever, right? So then you can copy paste it over really easily and exploit this vulnerability, because this should be an easy one. Just want to cover this in this video. So hopefully this was really of help to you guys. If so, definitely be sure to subscribe, hit the like button to help get the message out there to more people that might be struggling with some privilege escalation on Linux. And I will see you guys in the next video.